On the day of the wedding, the groom ran away. I turned around and married his father. If I can't be the bride, then I'll be your mother. When he returned and saw me still in his house, he thought I was stubbornly refusing to leave. He pulled out a pure white flower from behind and bluntly said that this was his true love, telling me not to harbor any delusions. I smiled faintly and held the hand of the man beside me. Eldest son, daughter-in-law, why don't you call me the mom and let me listen? Chapter 1. I am the eyes of the Smith group. Today was supposed to be the day I married Mr. Jones, but the groom who should have appeared at the wedding is nowhere to be found. You mean Steve ran away? My voice turned cold. That seems to be the case. The maid trembled as she spoke. My parents were furious as well for this wedding. The Smith and Jones families have been preparing for months. Invitations were sent to all the major aristocratic families in B City, and the media eagerly reported on it during this time. If Steve had any objections to the wedding, he could have raised them at any time. To run away on the day of the wedding is a direct slap in the face to the Smith family. After comforting me, my parents hurriedly left to discuss a plan of action. As I huddled in a corner contemplating how to proceed with this engagement banquet, there was a commotion at the door. Instinctively, I looked up and saw a man in a black suit with a handsome face. This man is Stanley, the current head of the Jones family and Steve's supposed father. Despite being 35 years old, he still looks like he's in his 20s. Stanley rarely attends large events, and even I can count on one hand the number of times I've seen him. At the sight of this man, people from various families in the banquet rushed forward, eager to get closer. Looking at Stanley's handsome face, a crazy idea suddenly popped into my head. As Stanley politely declined each person and walked towards me with large strides, I put on a polite smile and a hint of grievance in my voice. Uncle Jones, I said, I'm sorry for the inconvenience caused to you. This time I've already sent someone to catch him, and once he's caught, it's up to you to decide what to do with him. I will explain to everyone that the wedding will be delayed and all the losses this time will be borne by the Jones family. This is indeed a perfect solution, but I have a better choice now. Uncle Jones, I have been engaged to the Jones family since I was a child, but the person I marry doesn't necessarily have to be Steve, right? What the situation changed too quickly, and Stanley was momentarily taken aback after realizing what I meant. His gaze became deep. Of course, then who do you want to choose? I flashed a sweet smile and, without hesitation, extended my hand towards Stanley. Would you be willing to be my groom? Chapter 2. Stanley is not Steve's biological father, although he is his legal father. There are rumors that Stanley is unable to have children, and he is still unmarried to this day. When he was 25 years old, he adopted a child from a distant relative, and that child is Steve. Being unable to have children is not a big deal for me. With medical advancements nowadays, I believe it can be treated, and if it can't be cured, being childless doesn't seem too bad either. Stanley looked at the bright smile on the girl's face and raised an eyebrow. Are you sure? Of course, I didn't hesitate at all. Compared to Steve, Stanley is more than twice as handsome as a father figure. Even if it doesn't work out, just looking at his handsome face every day would make me content. It's definitely better than being betrayed by that ugly Steve. Stanley looked at me intently. All right, our distinct hands, as strong and mine delicate, were tightly held together, and my heart trembled along with it. The main character of this wedding has now changed without even needing to change clothes. The elegant white wedding dress, paired with Stanley's custom-tailored black suit, made us look like the bride and groom that were meant to be. Everyone attending the banquet is quite astute. Steve's runaway wedding was sudden and not intentionally concealed, so most of the guests at the wedding already know about it. The reporters even caught wind of the gossip and couldn't wait to raise their cameras towards the stage, eagerly anticipating the drama between the two prominent families in B City. Seeing me walk up on stage with Stanley, many people were left dumbfounded. They were quite impressed by the audacity of directly replacing the groom, the MC holding the freshly printed Script introduced the bride and groom with great professionalism. Now the bride and groom will exchange rings. Stanley took out a ring and slipped it onto my finger, and I did the same for him. When I tried to put the ring on Stanley's finger, I realized it didn't fit. I looked apologetic. The ring was sized for Steve. Time was tight, and there was no time to make a new one. Fortunately, we managed to make it work somehow. After exchanging rings, it was time for the groom to kiss the bride. I couldn't help but feel nervous. Stanley's public is that of a reserved and self-disciplined man. He has only attended a few events, and never with a female companion would he be willing to do it. I started to regret dragging Stanley into this impulsive decision, but just as I was lost in my thoughts, I suddenly felt a soft sensation on my lips. I couldn't believe it and opened my eyes only to see Stanley's flawless face. Seemingly aware of my astonishment, Stanley gently cued the back of my head, deepening the kiss. I slowly closed my eyes, and the applause of the guests filled my ears as they congratulated us. Chapter 3. My parents were unaware of my sudden decision, but I could only smile and respond to the congratulations from those around me. I couldn't possibly embarrass them in public. During the toasting, my mom took my hand and led me into the house where my dad was waiting. She locked the door. Mary, what's going on? How did you suddenly end up with Stanley? Because he's good-looking. I didn't know how to explain the impulsive decision I made. Good-looking? My mom thought about Stanley's face and realized he was indeed quite handsome, but he's more than 10 years older than you. He's almost done with elementary school, while you've just been born. So what don't they say older men know how to take care of people? I said shamelessly, but they say he's unable. My mom still had a worried expression on her face. Saw this as I racked my brains, trying to figure out how to brush it off. Someone knocked on the door. My mom opened the door, and there stood Stanley. Not sure if he had just arrived or had been standing there for a while. My parents quickly put on a polite and proper smile, as if they hadn't doubted him earlier. What can I do for you, Mr. Jones? I wanted to talk to Uncle and Aunt about something. Stanley spoke to my parents, and in a short while they no longer opposed this marriage proposal. Instead, they were very supportive of Stanley. Stanley is good, capable, and resourceful, my dad acknowledged Stanley's abilities, even though he was a bit older, but a man like him could protect his precious daughter. Someone like Steve, who ran away at the last minute, wasn't worthy of his daughter. Chapter 4. After the wedding, I moved into the Jones family mansion. This place is Stanley's own residence, and it's my first time here. The interior decoration is minimalist with a color scheme of black, white, and gray. The busy social events of the day left me smelling of alcohol and sweat, so Stanley went to freshen up first. I sat on the couch, taking a moment to rest. The sound of running water filled my ears, and through the frosted glass of the bathroom I could vaguely see the silhouette inside. Feeling a bit embarrassed, my face turned red, and I averted my gaze after a while the water stopped, and instinctively I looked up. Stanley emerged from the bathroom wearing a bathrobe, with the open collar revealing his muscular chest and faintly defined abs. I was dumbfounded. I never expected this man to have such a great physique. As I stared at him intently, a faint smile appeared at the corner of Stanley's mouth. Mary, why don't you take a shower? His deep magnetic voice resonated. Realizing that I had been staring at him, I shyly retreated into the bathroom, undressed, and let the water cascade over me, with Stanley's call of a Mary still echoing in my ears. Why didn't I notice earlier how attractive he is? After showering, I suddenly remembered that I hadn't brought my clothes in. There was no other choice. I carefully opened the bathroom door, just a crack revealing half of my face. Stanley, I forgot to bring my clothes. Could you please hand me the bag on the couch? Just pass it to me. Through the door. After a moment, there was no response from outside. I felt puzzled. Did Stanley leave? Just as I was about to ask again, I heard a reply. All right. His beautiful voice carried a hint of huskiness. Then I heard footsteps and the rustling sound of the bag being moved. Not long after, Stanley arrived in front of the bathroom. Here you go, I cautiously opened the door a little, revealing my arm, and he placed the clothes into my hand. Thank you. As I closed the bathroom door, I accidentally locked eyes with Stanley, and his deep gaze seemed to be burning with fire. While looking at the intimate lingerie in my hand, my face turned completely red. I had originally asked him to hand me the bag as well. Chapter 5. After lingering in the bathroom for a while, I finally decided to come out. I took a deep breath and pushed the door open. Stepping out into the room, Stanley was already in his pajamas, sitting on the bed, holding a document and reading. As soon as he saw me, he closed the document. Seeing that he didn't have any teasing expression on his face, I felt relieved. Coincidentally, I had something important to ask him. What are your plans regarding Steve? Seemingly anticipating my questions, Stanley handed me the document he was just reading and said, "Take a look." I walked over and received the document. Inside were the details of Steve's acquaintance with a girl, resembling the classic trope of a wealthy young man and an innocent girl in a tragic love story. There was even a photo attached next to the innocent girl, truly portraying her innocence. These two individuals had gone through a series of tumultuous relationships, breaking up and making up without my knowledge, until last night when the innocent girl found out that Steve was getting married. She cried and called Steve. Steve felt remorse and regret abandoning his soon-to-be bride and eloping with his innocent girl. Well, if I wasn't the bride myself, I genuinely wished them well. Unfortunately, I am the unlucky bride. Damn it, what were these two doing all this time? According to the time stamps on the document, their tumultuous relationship lasted for 2 months longer than the time it took to plan the wedding. If Steve had even hinted at something, I wouldn't be so angry. Steve has already taken his girlfriend abroad for a trip. I've sent someone to bring him back. If you're willing, we can cancel our wedding. Stanley sensed my anger and thought I regretted it. His voice sounded indifferent. Well, we never officially registered. We just had a wedding ceremony. But why would I regret it? I threw away trash and found a treasure. This is simply my luck. We are getting married. Once we're married, I'll be your wife. Let's go get registered tomorrow. I was very serious. Stanley saw the sincerity in my words and became serious as well. All right. Chapter 6. You said before that I could handle Steve however I wanted, right? I suddenly revealed a mischievous smile. Suit yourself very well. I want you to freeze his cards without funds. Let's see how Steve enjoys his time abroad with his innocent little flower. Stanley recognized my wickedness, and instead of stopping me, he added fuel to the fire. Starting today, I will seize all the funds under his name. Love, what do you think? This sudden love caught me off guard, and my face involuntarily turned red. When I realized it, I think that's great. If it can make his life even more miserable, I naturally feel happier. After dealing with the scumbag, it was time for the next step. Well, let's rest. Stanley seemed genuinely tired, and he raised his hand to turn off the lights. The room was enveloped in darkness. I lay stiffly on the bed, afraid to move. I'm still not very familiar with the wedding business. What should come next? The bridal chamber. Just as I was contemplating whether or not to take the initiative. Sleep, I won't touch you until you're willing. As I let out a sigh of relief, I remembered the rumors I had heard before with a stunning beauty by his side. Can Stanley really resist? Is it truly impossible? Just as I closed my eyes, Stanley opened his. It was then that I realized I had accidentally spoken my thoughts out loud. I quickly tried to play it off and pretended to be asleep, but before I could even count to 2 with my eyes closed, I felt another body against mine. Long and slender fingers rested on my soft waist. Warm breath tickled my ear. How about you tries it herself? Well, it turns out you shouldn't provoke a man who has abstained for many years. The consequences are yours to bear. Chapter 7. The next day, when I woke up, it was already late morning. The bed beside me was cold. Stanley wasn't there. Well, the CEO is very busy. After all, I felt my stomach growl with hunger, so I went downstairs to find something to eat. To my surprise, Stanley was sitting at the dining table flipping through a magazine. Did you rest well last night? Today Stanley wasn't wearing a suit. He had on a simple white shirt with the collar slightly open, revealing faint traces. Underneath, thinking about what happened yesterday, my face turned red again, but I couldn't help but retort. I rested very well, Stanley, upon hearing this address. Stanley's smile became even more playful. It seems like you were quite satisfied with last night. That puts my mind at ease. Who's praising him? This old man has really thick skin. I can't compare, really can't compare, I grumbled as I sat down at the dining table. I'm hung. Our Stanley indulgently smiled and went to the kitchen to bring over the warm food that had been kept. You won't be able to eat anything too greasy right after waking up. The breakfast on the table was simple, with a plate of steamed buns, 2 plates of side dishes, and a bowl of porridge. I was quite hungry and didn't mind the simplicity. I eagerly picked up a steamed bun and took a bite. My eyes instantly lit up. It's delicious. This bun is so tasty. Who made it? Stanley smiled without saying a word. A thought flashed through my mind. Could it be that you made it? Stanley lightly admitted, as long as it suits your taste. I really wanted to say something sarcastic, but the taste was truly amazing. One mustn't ignore their conscience. Seeing how happily I was eating, Stanley was also satisfied. It wasn't in vain that he had studied cooking. After leisurely finishing our meal, it was already getting late. I went upstairs to change my clothes. The decision to marry Stanley came so suddenly, and I hadn't made any preparations in advance. There were no women's clothes in the villa, so I had to bring my own clothes for my parents' house. Stanley furrowed his eyebrows slightly and made a phone call outside. By the time he came back, I had already finished getting ready. Let's go, Stan. All right. Today, Stanley was wearing a white shirt paired with light-colored jeans, looking like a youthful college student. But blushing, I looked at the exposed collarbone under his shirt and the red marks below it. Are you really going out like this? Why can't I? Stanley was puzzled. I could only step forward and adjust his collar. Then I took hold of Stanley's arm and we headed out. Stanley chuckled softly, his large hand holding on to my small hand. Chapter 8. With the release of our wedding photos, Stanley and I are truly husband and wife now, leaving the single life behind. I still feel a bit unfamiliar with it, but looking at the handsome groom and beautiful bride in the wedding photos, oh my, we really make a perfect match. I have such good taste. Steve went abroad with that little flirt. I froze his cards, and without money he'll be back within 2 days, hopping around like a fart. Now I'm especially looking forward to Steve's return, seeing his reaction when he finds out I've become his mother. Stanley is really thoughtful. After we got our marriage certificate and returned home, I saw that the once empty closet was filled with various clothes and jewelry, all brand new and in season. Time was tight, didn't have time for custom made, so just make do with these for now, Stanley said. Although I already had many of these clothes, I still gave him a kiss to show my satisfaction with his thoughtfulness. As I expected, all of Steve's cards were frozen. He can hardly move a step abroad. As the young master of a conglomerate, he never carried cash in his pockets. Luckily, he had that little flirt by his side. Since being with Steve, she hasn't worked anymore, but fortunately she still had some savings. If it weren't for the little flirt, he probably wouldn't be able to come back. The little flirt's real name is Lucy, she softly comforted Steve. Don't worry, something might have happened. Leighton, buy plane tickets and go back to take a look. Lucy, thank you. Seeing Lucy taking out the tickets she bought with her savings, Steve was filled with gratitude. He had a faint suspicion about his frozen cards. His cards had no spending limit, and the bank wouldn't dare freeze them without a reason. Mary, that woman must have said something. Anyway, the wedding is over, and it's time to return home. Lucy has been by his side for so long, and they truly love each other. It's time to give her a status after all she gave herself to him. For the first time, thinking like this, a smile of happiness appeared on Steve's face. Once they return home, they'll get married, and then he'll take over the Jones family from Stanley's hands. No one will be able to control him anymore. He can already envision his future life of happiness. Chapter ends. So unable to contain their excitement, The two hurriedly took a flight back home. Overnight, after a 7-hour flight, they arrived at the luxurious mansion inn. The morning precisely at 8 o'clock, knowing that Stanley usually doesn't stay at the old residence. Steve headed straight to Stanley's villa. At that moment, I lazily lounged on the couch watching TV and waiting for Stanley's breakfast. These past few days I've been spending all my time with Stanley. Before, he always seemed like someone who refrained from indulgence, but now I realize it was all an act in order to enjoy some alone time together. Stanley even gave the staff at the villa a short break, except for the cleaning aunt, who comes once every few days. As a result, Stanley took care of all 3 meals every day. There's nothing I can do about it. Who made me not skilled in the kitchen? Fortunately, Stanley is willing to do it every time he sees me eating with a full mouth. He playfully pokes me at a couple of times. Just then a mechanical voice came from the earpiece. Master, someone is knocking at the door. I slipped on my slippers and checked the surveillance outside the door. When I saw the dusty Steve and Lucy, I couldn't help but raise an eyebrow. They're quite fast. Your eldest son is back. I walked into the kitchen, leaned against Stanley's back, and watched him fry a perfect sunny side-up egg. Amazing. Some people are just exceptional. Well, it's up to you to handle. Stanley didn't even lift an eyelid. I've been waiting for you to say that. I left Steve and the little flirt outside the door, took my time to change clothes upstairs, and only then did I open the door. Chapter 10. The villa is huge, and the yard outside is also quite spacious. This place can even be considered a small estate. Previously, guests would arrive by car, but unfortunately the drivers are also on vacation. I couldn't be bothered to drive and pick them up, so I had to trouble them to make their own way inside. After getting off the plane, Steve and Lucy hurriedly made their way towards the villa without even having a meal. Now they are hungry and thirsty, but in order to play it cool, they have to endure and wait at the entrance. Finally, after a long wait, the gate opened, but they had to rely on their own legs to walk in. Wow, this place is really big, Lucy remarked, her eyes filled with envy and jealousy. When we get married, I'll buy you a place just as big, Steve proudly declared, unable to bear seeing his woman envious. It must be very expensive, Steve. It's not necessary, regardless of where we live. As long as I can be with you, I'm already happy, Lucy replied, displaying complete dependence on him, fully satisfying a man's ego. What's the big deal? In the future, I'll buy you several villas so you can switch between them, Steve boasted, saying it so casually. But as they stood in front of the gate, he felt a bit nervous. As for Stanley, who is technically his father, Steve never paid much attention to him when he was a child, but after witnessing how Stanley deals with disobedient people, he became obedient himself. As he grew older, he gained a deeper understanding of Stanley's methods, which made him even more odd. However, Stanley rarely concerns himself with household matters, which is why Steve dares to be so audacious and elope. He believes that Stanley would never meddle in such affairs. Moreover, as the heir of the Jones family, Stanley cannot treat him the same way he treats those people with such thoughts in mind. Steve encourages himself and builds up his confidence. Dad, he pushed open the door. But instead of Stanley, he was greeted by an unexpected person. I flashed a gentle smile at Steve outside the door. Hello there. Chapter 11. What are you doing here? Steve instinctively took a step back. Standing behind him was Lucy. Unable to dodge in time, Lucy was accidentally stepped on, causing tears to well up in her eyes from the pain. Upon hearing Lucy's voice, Steve quickly turned to look. Are you okay, Lucy? As long as you're fine, Steve, Lucy replied, gritting her teeth, her voice soft and gentle. In front of me, Steve spent some time comforting Lucy, and then Mary the first. Can't believe you're so malicious. What did I do? I stood there the whole time, not moving an inch. Don't accuse me of causing trouble. Steve realized that his accusation was baseless and redirected his anger. I can't believe you're so shameless. Our wedding didn't happen, so how dare you stay here? I don't like you. We have no future. This is my girlfriend, Lucy. We're getting married soon. What gave you that impression? I was puzzled, speechless. This kid didn't even bother to read the news from that day, but why did he think I would bother him? Have I been bothering him? I went through all the interactions I've had with Steve in my mind, and I'm certain I haven't. Steve must be brainless. Sister, I know you and Steve were engaged before, but you haven't gotten married yet, and Steve and I truly love each other. Please, just let us be together. Lucy began her performance, her eyes constantly shedding tears like a faucet. She cried uncontrollably, making it seemed like she had suffered great grievances. Steve felt heartbroken and yelled at me, Mary, you've gone too far. What does this have to do with me? Damn it, I'm having trouble keeping up with these two thought processes. Are they crazy? I sympathetically said. Is the mental hospital not enough for you? Making a scene out here? It took Steve a while to react. You're the one who's crazy. Steve looked at my indifferent expression and doubted that I didn't like him, but he thought about where we were right now. This is the Jones family, not the Smith family. If it weren't for him, why would I be here? It's all an act just to get his attention. Steve softened his tone. Mary, the first have feelings for someone else. We have no future together. Please apologize to Lucy, and maybe we can still be friends in the future. Who wants to be friends with you? Being brainless is contagious. Chapter 12. As I was preparing to retort, a deep and magnetic voice came from behind. What's going on? We all turned our heads simultaneously to see Stanley dressed in a custom-made black shirt that accentuated his perfect physique, coupled with his handsome face, restrained temperament, and his long and slender fingers placing the bowl on the table. Every move he made was incredibly alluring. Lucy was left in awe. Dad, we're back. Why is this woman here? Steve couldn't wait to ask Stanley. Stanley ignored him and waved at me. Come over and have a meal, because I was standing with Steve and Lucy when Stanley beckoned. They thought he was talking to them. Dad, you even made breakfast for us. Steve was deeply moved and immediately wanted to pull Lucy over. Blushing, Lucy followed along, but before they could even reach the table, Stanley stopped them. Dad, Steve was confused, but Stanley once again extended his hand towards me. My dear, I'm here. I immediately rushed forward and grabbed Stanley's hand in front of both of them, turning around to see Steve and Lucy. With widened eyes and gaping mouths, I gave them a radiant smile. Elder son, save Mom and let me hear it. Steve and Lucy stood frozen in their tracks, their mouths wide open. Stanley paid no attention to them and directly sat down at the dining table, still holding my hand. Let's eat. It's not good for the stomach when it's cold. The two standing there remained stunned for a full 2 minutes before finally reacting. Steve even forgot to lower his voice and exclaimed in disbelief, What? When did this happen? How is this possible? Just on our wedding day. Looking at Steve, who was so arrogant and self-absorbed just moments ago, now with a mouth wide enough to fit an egg. I felt happy. Serves you right for being conceited. Chapter 13. Dad, how could you marry her? Steve couldn't help but say, looking at my smug face. He speculated with the utmost malice. She must have done it on purpose. Dad, it's intentional. Besides, there's a more than 10-year age difference between you two. How can you be together? I admit that initially choosing Stanley did have a bit of a retaliatory meaning, but only a little. A bigger reason is that as a member of the Smith family, I can't let the Smith name be disgraced in front of so many people. People like us don't really respect love. I chose Stanley because of his status, and besides, Stanley is really much better than Steve in terms of looks, physique, intelligence, and everything else. The key is that he is willing to dot on people. So what if there's a 10-year age difference? Love knows no age. I raised my eyebrows and then kissed Stanley's cheek in front of Steve. Getting revenge on you at the cost of marriage? Are you worthy of that? Quick, elder son, call her a mom, otherwise I'll make your dad get another son, I threatened, pointing at myself. Satisfied appearance, Steve angrily said. Dad, aren't you going to do something about her? Upon hearing this, Stanley finally lifted his head and gave him a meaningful look. Just when Steve thought Stanley was finally going to teach me a lesson, Stanley affectionately ruffled my hair. How can I control her? Besides, Mary married me, so you should call her a mom. Seeing that Stanley was also on my side. Steve felt extremely frustrated as the eldest young master. For so many years, when has he ever suffered such grievances? At that moment, he turned his head and tried to walk away. Just then, he felt his hand being squeezed. It was Lucy. He looked down at Lucy's face full of grievances, all right for the sake of a better future with Lucy. I'll endure it, Mom. Steve gritted his teeth and managed to force out the word, oh my good eldest son. I couldn't hold back the smile at the corner of my mouth any longer, laughing unabashedly. Mary, seeing me laughing so happily without giving him any face, Steve's expression turned even darker. If you want to call me Jom here, son, I specially prepared a red envelope for you. I paid no attention, happily walked up to Steve and took out a red envelope from my pocket, placing it in his hand. Steve didn't even want to accept it as a young master. He didn't lack this little money at this moment. Stanley calmly said, take it and don't throw it away. Steve gritted his teeth and reluctantly took it, feeling like he was about to bite off his own teeth. Thank you, Mom. You're welcome. You're welcome. I showed my 8 white teeth. Chapter 14. Now that we've dealt with the eldest son, it's time for the little white flower. I thought to myself, oh, so this is my future daughter-in-law, I said, sizing up Lucy from head to toe. Although I had seen her in photos before seeing her in person, she really was nothing special. Steve, what kind of look is that? Although Lucy's small face is indeed quite attractive, fair and with watery eyes, her figure is as flat as a washboard. Perhaps to maintain her image as a pitiful little white flower, she was still wearing a white dress today, making herself look delicate and innocent, but the greed in her eyes, which she couldn't hide since entering the yard, shows that she is definitely not a simple person. Only Steve, this stupid narcissist, can't see it and believes that Lucy truly loves him. Hello, I'm Lucy. She hesitated, unable to bring herself to call the girl in front of her, who looked younger than herself, Mom. Oh, Lucy, not bad, not bad. I didn't mind, and left a sentence before returning to the dining table to eat. Now it's Stanley's turn to play his part. Stanley immediately understood. He wiped his mouth and asked, what's the matter? As soon as this mission was mentioned, Steve immediately ignored the previous humiliation. Dad, why is my card frozen? And why are the car and house under my name affected? Thinking about it, Steve remembered that he had wanted to drive his own luxury car from the airport, but he could only take a taxi all the way here. The smell in the car from whoever was in it before made his face turn green. Why don't you know? Stanley's demeanor instantly changed, his tone stern, exuding the aura of someone in power. You suddenly called off the wedding. Do you know what kind of impact it will have on the Smith and Jones families? Can you bear the consequences? Steve was terrified, wanting to kneel and beg for forgiveness, but thinking about Lucy by his side, he held back for the sake of his image. I just don't like her. What's wrong with wanting to be with the person I like? Looking at Steve acting like he did nothing wrong, I smeared. Don't make this matter sound so simple. It's true that you don't like me, but we've been together for a while now, and the wedding wasn't something we suddenly decided on. If you didn't like me, you could have said it earlier, running away from the wedding the day before. You're trampling on the face of our Smith family. Steve, marrying me, the only daughter of the Smith family, is equivalent to having the support of the Smith family behind him, which solidifies his position as the heir. Otherwise, the Jones family has so many children, and there are plenty of capable and intelligent ones among them. What makes him worthy? Chapter 15. After I finished speaking, Stanley looked at Steve and said, do you understand? Steve fumbled for words and couldn't come up with a defense for himself anymore. In reality, he was just foolish, having grown up with everything handed to him on a silver platter. No matter what mistakes he made, everyone overlooked them because he was the young master of the Jones family. This had also led to him not considering the consequences of his actions and simply doing whatever he wanted. I know I was wrong, and I won't dare to do it again in the future. Do you even have a future? Stanley's icy gaze swept over him. Steve realized and responded, no, there is no future. You want to be with her and naturally referred to Lucy. Yes, Dad, I love her. I can't imagine a future without being able to marry her. I want to marry her. Steve immediately became spirited and expressed his true feelings. Uncle Jones, Steve and I genuinely love each other. I truly love him. Lucy also spoke up, her eyes shyly looking at Stanley. How I smeared with disdain. As a woman, I naturally understood what that look meant. This little white flower is not an innocent person, but now it's not my place to intervene. I won't interrupt. Fine, but if you want to be with her, you have to give up your position as the heir of the Jones family. At the same time, everything I have bestowed upon you will be taken back. I won't support a useless person, Stanley said calmly. Regardless of what kind of person Lucy is, the heir of the Jones family cannot marry an ordinary woman unless Steve has the same capabilities as Stanley and can protect his wife. Then it's a different story. But Steve in his early 20s is still as naive as a teenager. Everything he is now is given by Stanley, given by the Jones family. Dad, Steve exclaimed in disbelief. He only wanted to marry the woman he loved, and now he had to pay such a great price for it. Chapter 16. Steve I Lucy was taken aback after hearing Stanley's words. This can't be. She had approached Steve in the first place, acting in front of him just to marry into the Jones family and live a life of luxury and abundance without having to worry about money. If Steve really agrees they would have nothing, no house, no car, no money, then why would she marry him? It would be better to let Steve stay in the Jones family. As long as she can control him, she can have as much money as she wants. But before she could persuade him, Steve tightly held her hand and said, Lucy, don't worry, I will never let you down. In the next moment, he turned to respond to Stanley. All right, I agree. From now on, I am no longer your son, no longer the heir of the Jones family. Can I have Lucy now? No. Lucy's heart ached, but she could only pretend to be moved on her face. Steve, you don't have to go this far. For me, you were originally the young master of the Jones family, with a promising future. Lucy, you don't need to persuade me anymore. I know what this decision represents. I promise to marry you, and I will definitely marry you. Don't worry, I will make sure you have a good life with my own hands. Steve had a deep expression of affection sitting at the table. I watched the two of them talk incongruously, unable to hide my smile on my face. Lucy must be infuriated speaking with such an idiot. Just let her experience the confusion she felt earlier. Well, I won't keep you any longer. Go ahead, Stanley said before Lucy could persuade Steve to reconsider issuing an order for them to leave. Without waiting for Lucy to convince Steve to turn back, Stanley had already given them the order to leave. They left just like that. Steve in his arrogance grabbed Lucy's hand and walked away. Once they were gone and the door closed, I couldn't hold back my laughter any longer. I laughed so hard that my stomach hurt. Oh my, you're so happy, Stanley said helplessly, coming over to rub my stomach. I raised my head, feeling proud and confident. Of course I'm happy. Just look at Steve's face. It was so dark. But I grabbed Stanley's hand and looked at him with shining eyes. Are you really going to kick Steve out after all he's been calling you a dad for so many years? Can you bear to do it? It's not just him who wants to call me dad, Stanley said, raising his hand to rub my head, and he lacks understanding. He has no sense of responsibility, so how can he bear the burden of the Jones family? That's right, he deserves to suffer. I nodded in agreement. The young master is used to living comfortably, never listening to any opposing opinions. How can he bear the responsibility of the Jones Group? Chapter 17. Stanley acted swiftly. As soon as Steve agreed, he immediately called the Jones family and ordered them not to help Steve in any way. Anyone who violated this order would face the consequences. Steve's parents were also furious with their son. They had gone to great lengths to give Steve to Stanley as their son, but now he couldn't see through the intentions of a woman. If this woman came from a respectable background, they might have reluctantly accepted it, but unfortunately she had a criminal record. So when Steve called his parents to ask for money, they refused without Hesitation, they wanted this brat to taste some hardship. Steve was left dumbfounded as his parents hung up on him. Lucy anxiously urged him. Steve, what did they say? Did your parents agree? It's fine, I still have friends. Steve's stubbornness started to show. He called all his friends one by one, but in the end, he was only able to borrow a little over $10,000. It may sound like a decent amount, but he used to throw around money that was worth much more than that. These fair weather friends, he was so angry that he slammed his phone hard on the ground, shattering it into pieces. He comforted Lucy, saying, Lucy, don't worry, I won't let you go back to the days of hardship. I'll find a job tomorrow, and I can provide you with a comfortable life myself. Lucy remained silent, bowing her head, a hint of something flickering in her eyes. She wanted more than just a comfortable life. Chapter 18. No matter how many setbacks Steve faced, I have already gone to Sonia for our honeymoon with Stanley. Sunshine Beach, here I come. Originally, I bought 2 bikinis planning to have some fun at the beach. Stanley also noticed the 2 bikinis I was holding, which, when combined, barely covered half of my body. He raised an eyebrow and said, are you sure you want to wear that? Yeah, is it not nice? I saw other people wearing them like this, and I carefully picked them out. I didn't notice anything off in his tone and happily gestured with the bikini in my hand. Why don't you try them on first? Sure, I readily agreed, but when I actually put on one of the bikinis in the room, I felt a bit shy. It was a light purple bikini that made my skin look fairer and exuded a pure and elegant charm. I couldn't help but feel proud when I looked at myself in the mirror. I never thought I could pull off this look. Isn't this pure? It's simply innocent and pure. Stanley is really lucky. As I walked out of the room as expected, Stanley couldn't take his eyes off me, reluctant to even blink. How do I look? Do I look good? I proudly twirled in front of him. Leighton, go, let's go out and have fun. Just as I was happily bouncing around, getting ready to open the door and go out, my arm was grabbed with a strong pull from Stanley. I was pulled into his embrace. Stanley had also changed into his swimwear, his chest and abs exposed. He suddenly pressed me against him, and my face couldn't help but flush. What are you doing? I think my wife looks incredibly beautiful like this, so it's better if we don't go out today. I don't want others to see you like this. Stanley reached out and brushed the hair near my ear, his deep and magnetic voice making my heart race. Well, what do you want to do? I gave him a mischievous smile, leaning in close to his ear and whispering softly, what do you think? Stanley's gaze turned intense. Chapter 19. Waking up on the second day, I stood in front of the mirror looking at the marks on my body. Stanley, you petty old man, I gritted my teeth, determined to make him sleep on the couch for 2 weeks, no 2 months. When we get back, I marry. I'm not so easily bullied. But after going through all of that, I reluctantly gave up on my skimpy bikini and opted for relatively more conservative clothes. I really don't want to wake up to another day like this. If I keep sleeping for a few more times, we might as well end the honeymoon and go back home. The beach in Sonia, the endless sea blending with the blue sky, is truly beautiful. Stanley just sat quietly on the sun lounger watching me play. When it was about time, he called me over to apply sunscreen, feed me fruits, and give me juice. I just lay down flat and enjoyed with my mouth open. Life couldn't get any better than this. As for Steve, he's in a miserable state. He has a habit of being careless with money, although he borrowed over $100,000 from friends before, coupled with some savings. He could barely scrape together over $200,000, but under his unrestrained spending within less than a month, there was hardly anything left of that amount. Steve still hadn't found a job. On the other hand, Lucy managed to find a job as a waitress, taking on the responsibility of providing for the family. Lucy still holds on to hope, thinking that the Jones family might just be pretending to force her out, and she continues to play the role of a good girl in front of Steve. Naturally, Steve was deeply moved and poured his heart out to her. He entrusted the remaining tens of thousands of yuan in his pocket to Lucy, and with Lucy's introduction, he found a job in a company. After all, Steve was a graduate from a prestigious university, so he had no trouble getting hired, but Steve was used To being arrogant once he entered the small company, he was just a low-level employee and anyone in the company could step on him. How could he tolerate that? Within 3 days of joining the company, he got into a fight with his boss. He ended up losing tens of thousands of yuan and was honorably dismissed. Chapter 20. Steve, you really need to control your temper. If you keep going like this, what will our future be like? After finally saving up a few tens of thousands of yuan, it all went the drain in an instant. Lucy felt very frustrated, but she had to suppress her anger and patiently counsel Steve. I don't want this either. Who does he think he is, bossing me around all day, telling me what to do? And he says I'm a coward. Steve lowered his head, muttering like a child who had done something wrong. After these days of experience, he realized that nobody cared about him once he wasn't the young master of the Jones family anymore. Only Lucy still treated him the same as before, and he couldn't afford to lose her. Steve, I know it's not your fault, but we have no money, no influence, only the option to endure and wait. Saying this, Lucy took Steve's hand and placed it on her belly. I'm already carrying your child here, Steve. We need to give him a good life. Really? Steve's eyes lit up. Yes, so Steve, you have to pull yourself together. If we can't give him a good life, I'd rather not have this child. Lucy lowered her head, her voice choked with emotion. Or maybe you can go and plead with Uncle Jones and also your parents for the sake of this child. They might let you come back. Lucy, trust me, I want to give him a good life and I will do my utmost. Steve's gaze became determined, however, he still didn't agree to Lucy's request to seek help from the Jones family. Steve also had his own pride deep down. If he agreed to Stanley's conditions, he had to follow through. He wanted to rely on himself to live a good life rather than relying on others. Chapter 21. 1 month later, when Stanley and I returned from our honeymoon, I was shocked to see Steve. Is this still the arrogant young master from before? His hair was messy, covered in dust, and his clothes were wrinkled and dirty. If you didn't know better, you would think he was a construction worker from some site. He was also holding a box of milk and a box of pastries. What's all this? I asked. Steve knew that his current appearance didn't match the grandeur of a luxurious mansion. He scratched his head, looking slightly embarrassed. Don't worry, I'm not here to ask for money, he said. What do you mean? I furrowed my brow, not quite understanding. I just wanted to come and thank you, Steve replied. He placed the milk and pastries on the ground, probably worried that the dirt on him would get on me. Standing a few steps away, he bowed to me. I took a step back in surprise and didn't dare to accept the items. Thank me. Thank me for what? Thank me and Stanley for kicking him out and enjoying our lives. Has Steve gone mad? Yes, thank you. If it weren't for the words you said to me, I might never have experienced the happiness I feel now. Although I'm not as wealthy as before, being with Lucy every day makes me truly happy. The smile on Steve's face was genuine. He was truly happy. In this past month, Steve had gone through so much. He had lived a comfortable life, being adored by everyone in the first half of his life. And now he was living in misery with Lucy being pregnant. Steve couldn't bear to let her go out and work again. Seeing the money in his hands running out, he gritted his teeth and found another job working in a private company. He couldn't stand the arrogance of the management, and the wages as a server or dishwasher were too low, not enough to support Lucy and their unborn baby. So Steve made a tough decision and started working as a bricklayer on a construction site. He really went to work on a construction site, earning 500 yuan a day. The price of a drink he used to have was double that amount, but now he was working hard for this money. During this time, he learned how difficult life was for the lower-level employees, something he had never understood before. Although it was tough and tiring, now seeing the money in his bank account made him feel fulfilled. Coming home every day to a warm meal and Lucy's smiling face warmed his heart. Is this what it feels like to have a home? Chapter 22. I saw the joy radiating from Steve and understood I never expected Lucy to endure for this long. Then Steve dropped another bombshell. I came here to tell you that Lucy is pregnant. We're having a child. and I will work hard to support them on my own. I was surprised in my heart, but didn't show it on my face as long as. You're happy, Stanley, and I wish you all the best. That was the response Steve had been waiting for, and he happily walked away. I watched his figure and felt like he was acting like a fool, still wearing a big green hat. Back at the villa, I told Stanley about Lucy's pregnancy and that his eldest son had sent a box of milk and pastries asking if he wanted to try them. Stanley was also a bit surprised and got up to make a phone call. 2 hours later, fresh information arrived. Stanley opened it and glanced at it while I curiously leaned over. How is Lucy really carrying Steve's child? I asked. Take a look. Stanley didn't speak directly. He just handed me the document. I grew even more curious and took it from him, scanning it from top to bottom. It detailed all of Steve's experiences over the past 2 months. No wonder he had said all those inexplicable things at the door earlier. Turns out he had truly gone through a lot, from being the young master of the Jones family, adored by everyone, to now experiencing the warmth and coldness of human relationships. Not bad, not bad. He's making progress. But as I read the next line, I raised an eyebrow and thought about Steve's blissful expression. How it seems he's in for another blow. Steve is indeed striving for the growth of his wife and child, which is commendable, but unfortunately his judgment isn't very good. Chapter 23. Wait a little longer, it should be soon. Stanley took the document from my hand and affectionately ruffled my hair. It seems like you don't really care about Steve as you pretended before, I said playfully, leaning on Stanley. The fact that the document was delivered so quickly proves that Stanley had been monitoring Steve all along. No, Stanley shook his head and summed it up. You just wanted to watch the show, so he had purposely had someone follow Steve and Lucy, ensuring that I could witness the whole drama. You're really something. I giggled and took a bite out of Stanley's face, leaving a ring of teeth marked S on his handsome face. Do you really have to bite? Stanley chuckled, a mixture of helplessness and indulgence in his eyes. Why not? You belong to me entirely, I said playfully. Stanley chuckled softly. His deep and magnetic voice resounded. Of course you can. It's my honor. However, my dear wife, I have to go to the company this afternoon. If you don't mind, you can take a few more bites. Oh, no way. I quickly jumped off him and went to get a towel. It would damage my elegant and sophisticated image. The reality unfolded just as Stanley had said. Without much time passing, within a month Lucy sold the house and ran away with all the money. Steve spent money recklessly, so Lucy suggested that she take charge of all the money. Naturally, Steve agreed without hesitation. During this time, Steve earned over 10,000 yuan from working at the construction site, and he handed it all over to Lucy. He only kept a few hundred yuan for himself. Lucy's sudden disappearance caught Steve off guard, and he didn't even notice anything unusual. He went to work as usual, but when he returned home, he found another group of people living in the house. In his anxious inquiries, he learned that the previous owner had sold the house to them. Steve sat in despair at the street corner, still holding the strawberries he had bought for Lucy along the way. Chapter 24. Why Steve couldn't understand. Everything was fine before. Why did Lucy leave? Did he do something wrong? With only a few hundred yuan in his hand, it wasn't enough to spend a night in this bustling city. No blanket, not even something to keep warm. Steve could only curl up on a park lounger, shivering in the chilly night of early winter, unable to sleep due to the cold. Steve's mind kept replaying the events of the past 6 months. He finally believed that he had been deceived. A choked sound somewhere between laughter and tears escaped Steve's throat. After enduring until dawn, Steve Grogg stood up and made his way to the police station. Lucy won't get away with deceiving him like this. Just steps away from the police station, his vision went black and he fainted. When he opened his eyes again, he found himself in a hospital room. Awake, I sat up and poured a glass of water for Steve. What are you doing here? Steve's voice was hoarse, and he looked visibly surprised to see me. You fainted at the entrance of the police station, and the police called us To inform us, I said truthfully, Stanley had some urgent matters to attend to, as you know there's a lot going on at the company. After drinking the water, Steve's throat felt much better. Thank you, no need to thank me. It was just a small favor. I waved my hand nonchalantly, sitting back on the chair and observing Steve with a hint of amusement. What are your plans now? I asked. Upon hearing my question, Steve fell silent, not uttering a word. I understood and said, if you don't want to talk about it, that's fine. You're awake now and my mission is complete. I'll leave. Steve clenched his fists tighter and tighter just as I was about to leave the hospital room. Wait, Mom. Surprised, I turned around, and then with a thud, Steve got off the bed and knelt directly in front of me. Chapter 25. What are you planning to do? I asked knowingly. I want to beg you. It was my fault before. I was blind. Please, as an adult, have mercy and help me. Steve pleaded sincerely. To have this usually proud young master genuinely apologized to me, it was not an easy feat. Feeling satisfied, I nodded readily. All right. Really? Steve seemed taken aback by my quick agreement. I raised an eyebrow disapprovingly. What's with that look? I have a kind heart, you know. Saying that, I took out a piece of paper from my bag and handed it to Steve. Here, this is the reason why your little girlfriend left. Steve eagerly took it, examining it closely, not willing to miss a single word. Lucy was not as innocent and understanding as she appeared to be during high school. Lucy had already gone through an abortion and later got involved with a few delinquents. Her focus was never on the classroom, so naturally she didn't get into college at such a young age. She had to start working. Being lazy, she wasn't willing to work honestly and only earned a small amount of money each day. Lucy set her sights on Steve, who often dined at the hotel, a young master with a strong ego, living a privileged life. Men like him were the easiest to deceive, and indeed Lucy succeeded in deceiving Steve. If it weren't for me, who appeared unexpectedly and disrupted Lucy's plan, she would have succeeded. The child she was carrying was not Steve's. It belonged to another delinquent. This child was conceived 2 months before she got together with Steve. The pregnant NY became apparent after 5 or 6 months, and that's why she couldn't wait any longer and had to leave. If Steve had become suspicious and discovered the truth, she wouldn't have gained anything. So that's how it is. She really saw me as a clown. Tears streamed down his face. He truly loved Lucy. Watching Steve kneeling on the ground, crying his heart out, I shook my head with a sigh. All one should never let their heart rule in matters of love. Chapter 26. Steve cried so miserably, but he quickly pulled himself together. The day before he was sobbing uncontrollably, but the next day he put on a suit and went to work at Jones Corporation. Naturally, this was arranged by Stanley. However, this time when Steve returned to Jones Corporation, he wasn't in the position of assistant general manager anymore. Instead, he became a low-level employee. According to Stanley, don't expect to gain without putting in any effort. How can you prove your abilities without achieving some results? He had to climb up on his own. Steve, after all, was a graduate of a prestigious university, and he managed to navigate his way through the lower ranks quite smoothly. After spending a few months outside, his temperament visibly became more stable. He handled both big and small matters well. Stanley, who never tolerated any flaws, was also very satisfied. After Lucy left Steve, her life didn't turn out as well as she had imagined. That small-time hoodlum Lee was someone who had always been involved in the underworld and didn't have a stable job he had been secretly in contact with Lucy all along. After learning that Steve had been kicked out of the Jones family, he directly persuaded Lucy to leave Steve and run away with the money. Lucy did as he said, worried that Steve would come looking for them. The two of them flew overnight to another city. In the beginning, they still had money to spend, and their relationship seemed harmonious. Lucy was already 6 months pregnant, and her pregnancy was starting to show. Due to morning sickness, she didn't have the same youthful beauty as before. Lee didn't say it aloud, but he was disgusted in his heart. He took the money and went out to find other women behind Lucy's back. He even told Lucy that he was going out to work and earn money for her and the baby. Lucy wasn't foolish. Every time Lee came back, there was the scent of perfume on his clothes. "Are you seeing other women behind my back?" Lucy asked with a cold voice. Lee impatiently waved her off. "I'm busy with work all day. I don't have time." "Stop thinking nonsense." "Am I thinking nonsense? The scent of perfume on your clothes is so strong that I'm afraid others won't smell it," Lucy said coldly. "Let me tell you, Lee, we're both in this situation together. If you dare to betray me, I'll make you regret it." Before, he used sweet words to coax her, but now he was impatient. "It's over." Lee's face stiffened. He turned his head and hugged Lucy tightly with a deep affection in his eyes. "Lucy, rest assured, I will never betray you. I love you." Lucy didn't notice the flicker of disgust in Lee's eyes. She believed his lies and sweetly placed Lee's hand on her belly. "I love you too. Our baby is already 6 months old. In a few more months, you'll be able to see him. Will be happy for a lifetime." "Yes, we'll be happy for a lifetime." Lee's eyes were filled with deep affection. Chapter 27. I looked at the video that the private detective sent to my phone and couldn't help but laugh. Is Lucy really foolish or smart? She managed to play Steve like a fiddle but couldn't see that Lee was doing the same to her. Could this be what they call a pregnancy brain, or being blinded by love? But in my opinion, Lucy doesn't seem like someone who would just sit around and wait for her fate. Now it's just a matter of time before I sit back and watch them tear each other apart. 2 months later, Lucy caught Lee red-handed in a hotel room with another woman. Lucy was furious. She had given up so much for Lee, and this is how he repays her. In her anger, she forgot that she was 8 months pregnant and got into a physical fight with the other woman. Naturally, Lee protected his new lover amidst the chaos. Lucy fell down and went into premature labor. The baby was stillborn. It was a fully formed male fetus, but due to the premature birth and excessive bleeding, Lucy's uterus couldn't hold on, and she would never be able to conceive again. During this time, Lee didn't even bother to visit Lucy as he was busy with the other woman. He only expressed a hint of regret when he heard it was a boy. Lucy and tighter just as I was about to leave the hospital room. Wait, Mom." Surprised, I turned around, and then with a thud, Steve got off the bed and knelt directly in front of me. Chapter 25. What are you planning to do? I asked knowingly. I want to beg you. It was my fault before. I was blind. Please, as an adult, have mercy and help me. Steve pleaded sincerely. To have this usually proud young master genuinely apologized to me, it was not an easy feat. Feeling satisfied, I nodded readily. "All right." Really? Steve seemed taken aback by my quick agreement. I raised an eyebrow disapprovingly. "What's with that look? I have a kind heart, you know." Saying that, I took out a piece of paper from my bag and handed it to Steve. "Here, this is the reason why your little girlfriend left." Steve eagerly took it, examining it closely, not willing to miss a single word. Lucy was not as innocent and understanding as she appeared to be. During high school, Lucy had already gone through an abortion and later got involved with a few delinquents. Her focus was never on the classroom, so naturally she didn't get into college at such a young age. She had to start working. Being lazy, she wasn't willing to work honestly and only earned a small amount of money each day. Lucy set her sights on Steve, who often dined at the hotel, a young master with a strong ego, living a privileged life. Men like him were the easiest to deceive, and indeed Lucy succeeded in deceiving Steve. If it weren't for me, who appeared unexpectedly and disrupted Lucy's plan, she would have succeeded. The child she was carrying was not Steve's. It belonged to another delinquent. This child was conceived 2 months before she got together with Steve. The pregnant NY became apparent after 5 or 6 months, and that's why she couldn't wait any longer and had to leave. If Steve had become suspicious and discovered the truth, she wouldn't have gained anything. So that's how it is. She really saw me as a clown. Tears streamed down his face. He truly loved Lucy watching Steve kneeling on the ground, crying his heart out. I shook my head with a sigh. All one should never let their heart rule in matters of love. Chapter 26. Steve cried so miserably, but he quickly pulled himself together. The day before he was sobbing uncontrollably, but the next day he put on a suit and went to work at Jones Corporation. Naturally, this was arranged by Stanley. However, this time when Steve returned to Jones Corporation, he wasn't in the position of assistant general manager anymore. Instead, he became a low-level employee. According to Stanley, don't expect to gain without putting in any effort. How can you prove your abilities without achieving some results? He had to climb up on his own. Steve, after all, was a graduate of a prestigious university, and he managed to navigate his way through the lower ranks quite smoothly. After spending a few months outside, his temperament visibly became more stable. He handled both big and small matters well. Stanley, who never tolerated any flaws, was also very satisfied. After Lucy left Steve, her life didn't turn out as well as she had imagined. That small-time hoodlum Lee was someone who had always been involved in the underworld and didn't have a stable job. He had been secretly in contact with Lucy all along. After learning that Steve had been kicked out of the Jones family, he directly persuaded Lucy to leave Steve and run away with the money. Lucy did as he said, worried that Steve would come looking for them. The two of them flew overnight to another city. In the beginning, they still had money to spend, and their relationship seemed harmonious. Lucy was already 6 months pregnant, and her pregnancy was starting to show due to morning sickness. She didn't have the same youthful beauty as before. Lee didn't say it aloud, but he was disgusted in his heart. He took the money and went out to find other women behind Lucy's back. He even told Lucy that he was going out to work and earn money for her and the baby. Lucy wasn't foolish. Every time Lee came back, there was the scent of perfume on his clothes. Are you seeing other women behind my back? Lucy asked with a cold voice. Lee impatiently waved her off. I'm busy with work all day. I don't have time. Stop thinking nonsense. Am I thinking nonsense? The scent of perfume on your clothes is so strong that I'm afraid others won't smell it, Lucy said coldly. Let me tell you, Lee, we're both in this situation together. If you dare to betray me, I'll make you regret it. Before, he used sweet words to coax her, but now he was impatient. It's over. Lee's face stiffened. He turned his head and hugged Lucy tightly with a deep affection in his eyes. Lucy, rest assured, I will never betray you. I love you. Lucy didn't notice the flicker of disgust in Lee's eyes. She believed his lies and sweetly placed Lee's hand on her belly. I love you too. Our baby is already 6 months old. In a few more months, you'll be able to see him. Will be happy for a lifetime. Yes, we'll be happy for a lifetime. Lee's eyes were filled with deep affection. Chapter 27. I looked at the video that the private detective sent to my phone and couldn't help but laugh. Is Lucy really foolish or smart? She managed to play Steve like a fiddle, but couldn't see that Lee was doing the same to her. Could this be what they call a pregnancy brain, or being blinded by love? But in my opinion, Lucy doesn't seem like someone who would just sit around and wait for her fate. Now it's just a matter of time before I sit back and watch them tear each other apart. 2 months later, Lucy caught Lee red-handed in a hotel room with another woman. Lucy was furious. She had given up so much for Lee, and this is how he repays her. In her anger, she forgot that she was 8 months pregnant and got into a physical fight with the other woman. Naturally, Lee protected his new lover amidst the chaos. Lucy fell down and went into premature labor. The baby was stillborn. It was a fully formed male fetus, but due to the premature birth and excessive bleeding, Lucy's uterus couldn't hold on, and she would never be able to conceive again. During this time, Lee didn't even bother to visit Lucy as he was busy with the other woman. He only expressed a hint of regret when he heard it was a boy. Lucy mouthed him. I couldn't make a sound. I was going to report him for being unfair. Just as we were lost in our own world, we heard a sweet voice. I want a kiss too. We looked down and realized it was our little baby. Both Stanley and I blushed. Embarrassed kiss our daughter, not understanding the situation raised her little hand asking for a hug. Stanley picked up our little bundle of joy and, without saying a word, we exchanged a glance and planted 2 kisses on our daughter's soft little cheeks.